Introduction's not necessary because all of you have participated in our Lunch and Learns. Thank you very much. And so I'm just going to give the floor to JoLyn, and she's going to go further with accountability.
All right. Thanks, Renee. Well, welcome back, everybody. Nice to have you back. Some of you haven't seen. You're new. What was your name? I'm sorry? Seth. Okay. Nice to meet you, Seth. So, and you two are new, too.
I was at the lunch and learn yesterday.
You were at the lunch. Okay. And
Sheena.
Sheena, that's right. And
Rachel.
Okay, good. Welcome. Glad to have you here. All right, and everybody's got a handout, right? Renee, did you give them an extra sheet of paper for that one activity?
No, I figured they could just write on their note.
Okay, they have, okay, that's fine. All right, yeah. Everybody has a pen or pencil, right? Because you are going to need, okay, good enough. Yeah, that's right. What a dumb question, huh? Wear a mat. Ask if you have a pen or pencil. All right. Well, this afternoon, what we're going to do is we're going to expand on the concepts that we talked about either yesterday morning or this morning, or I guess was it noon, right? I keep wanting to think it was morning. But we're going to expand on those concepts, and you're going to have an opportunity to, we're going to dig into the steps, the see it, own it, solve it, do it, deeper, excuse me, look at the behaviors that are associated with each one of those steps, give you an opportunity to assess yourself as a person of accountability, as well as your team or your department. Now I'll tell you this when we do the activity also, but you can decide and be thinking about when you do the assessment of accountability on your team, who your team is. That's up to you. It can be your department, it can be the university as a whole, whatever you want to do, whatever you decide, whatever's going to be most beneficial for you. You can choose that, okay? All right, so remember we talked about above the line, below the line. We're going to be focused on above the line because that's what we're trying to instill in people and as an organization. We want a culture of accountability where people see it, own it, solve it, and do it. The problems, the situations, the issues, whatever, what have you that come up, all right? So we talked about below the line behaviors, and I'm not going to go into those a lot because we already talked about those. But just I want to remind us that those can creep in so easily. Even if we are a person of accountability, sometimes it's easy to fall back and get into some of these below the line behaviors. In fact, we have a thing in our organization where if we're in a conversation and someone gets into it's not my job or the finger pointing, we'll say, hey, you're below the line. And it's just kind of a common thing that we got to bring everybody back up. So that may be something that you want to instill in yourselves. Just say, you know what, we're below the line here, we need to move up because we're not getting anywhere. So, all right, like I said, we talked about below the line behaviors. But I do want to look at a couple of things on how to recognize when you are below the line. Because sometimes it's hard to really recognize when we are below the line. We need to be kind of brought out. So here's some ways or some kind of ahas or some red flags, if you will, that if you find yourself blaming others and pointing the finger, that's a pretty obvious thing to you that you are below the line. In the organization I work with, we have a big nuclear plant as part of our generation mix of energy. And that nuclear plant employs about a half of our employees of our entire utility. And they take a lot of resources, both from human resources as well as money, time. And so I am just as guilty as a lot of people. We a lot of times point the finger at, it's Cooper, is their nuclear station, is the name of the nuclear plant. And when we don't get something, we want to install a program or something and we can't because of resources. 9 times out of 10, the fingers go up and blame Cooper because they're the ones that are sucking us dry. We always say they're sucking us dry of all of our resources. That's why we don't get to do a lot of these things. Now, does that get us anywhere as an organization? Absolutely not. No. It doesn't make anything better. In fact, it makes things worse. So I share that with you because even though we preach accountability all the time in our organization, we still are not real good at this one of blaming others. And usually it's our nuclear plant that we blame for when things go wrong or when we don't get something that we want because it's a resource issue. If you don't listen when others tell you directly or indirectly that they think you could have done more to achieve better results, there's a sign that you're below the line. Yesterday, after the morning presentation, Renee gave me some feedback on some things that she felt I could have done better to do a better job in that workshop. Did I like hearing that? No, absolutely I didn't. In fact, there was part of me that I got a little bit defensive, and my little hairs on my neck went up a little bit because I didn't want to hear it. But yet, when I really took a step back and said, you know what, she's doing it so we can get better results from other workshops that we're doing, then it made all the sense in the world, and I was much able to accept it much better. So that's another indication. If your discussion of problems focuses more on what you cannot do rather than what you can do. Again, remember the question that an accountable person always asks themselves? What is it? What more can I do? It's not more what more can I not do, but it's what more can I do. So if you find yourself thinking about, I can't do this because of that, or I can't do this because of him, or I can't do this because of her, you're below the line. Think about what you can do, because you're the only person that can change you. If you feel you're being treated unfairly and you don't think you can do anything about it. Had a situation just the other day. I had a medical issue come up in the morning and I had to be late for work. And I was about 2 hours late because of it. And my supervisor told me that I needed to take vacation for it. Well, I'm the type of person, I work through lunch usually. I usually work probably till 6, sometimes 6:30 at night. And I'm thinking, what? Are you kidding me? I have to take vacation. When I bust my tail, I work almost every noon over my lunch. I don't take a lunch. I work late at night, and you're making me take vacation. And I felt like I was being treated unfairly, and I couldn't do anything. Now, to be truly accountable, what could I have done with that situation? What should I have done if I was truly took an accountable way to approach that situation? I felt like I was treated unfairly, and he was being totally unreasonable by making me take vacation after I work all of these other hours. But I sat there and I stewed about it for probably a good hour after I got to work. So I was non-productive, so I might as well have been home another hour because I didn't get anything done. I was very unproductive. But if I was really accountable, how could I have handled that? Yeah.
Obviously, some sort of a conversation would take place after the emotions have come down and talk about off-hour times, those sort of things, and if there's any sort of compensation or something for.
You're exactly right. I should have communicated, could have talked to him, right? I still haven't yet. But I think you make a good point. Once the emotion is gone from it, and the emotion's not gone from it yet completely, but I do need to have a conversation with him because in my heart, I do think it's unfair. Now, maybe he's got totally other reasons why he's approaching it the way he is, but I don't know that without talking to him. So I will, it's just I am not there yet. So again, it's even though I teach this stuff and I still don't do it very well sometimes. So if you spend a lot of time talking about things you cannot change, for example, your boss, the economy's performance, regulations, that sort of thing. Again, thinking about what can you control, because the only thing you can control is yourself. But if you find yourself where your conversation is centered around all these other things out here that you can't do anything about, there's a red flag, you're below the line, or you could be below the line. And then the other one is you stop working on finding solutions and your reasons become excuses. So in other words, you're focused more on the problem and all the excuses of why you can't solve the problem rather than focusing on the solution or possible solutions to the problem. All right? Other examples that you can think of maybe might tell you that you're below the line as opposed to being above the line in the other situations?
Do you think that if you're unhappy or have a bad attitude all the time, you're obviously below the line?
Yes, exactly. Some people are just, they live below the line. And to me, it's kind of a miserable, it would be a miserable existence, I would think, to live below the line. But there again, you have a choice, right? We can go above that line by simply a change of our attitudes. So, all right. So again, the question is it more productive to be above the line or below the line? Obviously, it's much more productive to be above the line where we're going to look at the situation, own it, solve it, and do it. So here's the steps that we're going to be focusing on this afternoon. All right? See it, own it, solve it, and do it. And these are the 16 behaviors. There's 4 behaviors with each one of the steps. And we're going to take them in the order of that we talked about. How to see it, own it, solve it, and do it. So let's take the first one. See it. Okay, the 4 behaviors associated with seeing it. The first 2 we're going to kind of look at together because they're very closely related. Obtaining the perspectives of others, communicating openly and candidly, asking for and offering feedback, and hearing the hard things in order to see reality. All right? So, again, see it as a whole is you're seeing the situation for what it is, and you're seeing the entire situation. You're not seeing just your little piece of it, but you're seeing the entire problem or the entire situation, the entire issue, the entire process, project, whatever it is. All right? So let's take a look at the first 2 behaviors, like I said. Now, I'm going to do an activity here to kind of help illustrate this. So someplace on a piece of paper where you have room to write a few words, have that kind of handy to you. All right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, in your handout, it says the word collage is the next slide. Okay? What I'm going to show you is a collage up on the screen. And it's got several different pictures inside the collage. What I want you to do is I'm going to give you about 15 seconds. I want you to write down everything that you see in that collage. And write down as many as you can. All right? Is everybody clear on what we're going to do? Okay, ready? Go. Stop. Okay. Boy, we got some competitive people in here. I could see them, they weren't even looking down. They were just like, paper's on fire. All right. Tell me what you saw. Just kind of call out. What'd you see? Quaker Oats. Dunkin' Donuts. We got some hungry people here. Alphabets. Raggedy Ann. What'd you say, Marshall? The flag. Hershey Kiss. Cats and dog. A cat and a dog. Stack of quarters. Okay. Box of Marlboro Lights. Marbles. Pardon me, Trudy? Slim Fast. Campbell Soup. Red Roses. That's right, I forgot. Not very many people see those usually. A wine bottle. All right. Did anybody see 10 items or more? Count up your items. 6 down. Okay. How many did you have? 12. Anybody have more than 12? Okay, there were 27 items on the collage. Now, I'll go back and show you here in just a minute, but let's talk a little bit about this. You all saw the same picture, right? Or the same collage for the same amount of time. So why did some of you see different things than others? Did all of you see the Quaker Oats? Anybody not see the Quaker Oats? Raise your hand. Okay. How about the turkey? Did anybody see the turkey? Did anybody not see the turkey? Raise your hand. Okay, Aubrey didn't see the turkey. Sheena didn't see the turkey. Okay, so why did not everybody see the turkey? Why didn't Aubrey and Sheena see the turkey?
They were focused on other things.
Okay, you're focused on other things. Why else? Why didn't you see all 27 items? Okay, you didn't have time to see it all. Why else? Other reasons why you might not have seen all 27 items?
Different colors jump out at us more.
Okay, maybe certain things jump out at you more. Why else didn't you all see the same thing, when you all saw the same collage? Pardon me? You're focused on different parts of the collage? Is that what you said? Okay. How many of you had a system for looking at what you were trying to do? Okay, what was your system? What were you doing when you were going
Well,
through?
it wasn't necessarily what I was seeing, but rather how I wanted to interpret what I was seeing.
Okay, and how did you do that?
It was all generic. I never did any of the, I wrote down coffee, oatmeal, turkey, lotion, soup, not the brand name.
Okay, all right, so you went very high level, just very generic in terms of what you identified, okay?
I started at quick roads and went down.
You went down, all right, started at the top, went down. Anybody go across? Usually we have somebody that kind of goes back and forth diagonal. Nobody? All right. Okay, so let's take this to, well, let me show you the collage again. So did anybody see the lady sitting on top of the quarters? You did? Okay. So you see anything in there how about the ship? Hardly anybody saw the ship. Why do you suppose that is? It's kind of at the bottom, isn't it? It's kind of tucked away, right? Kind of being covered up. All right. The Virginia Slim lights, did anybody see those? Okay. The lifesavers, nobody said lifesavers either, I don't think, did they? Did you? You saw the lifesavers? Okay. All right. So let's take a look at this, this thing. Now, think about what we just did. You all saw a picture. All right? Let's say that collage or a picture that I put up on the screen is a problem. All right? That's the problem. What we just went through, how does that relate to accountability in getting problems solved? What we just did when we talk about obtaining perspectives of others and communicating openly and candidly. What does that have to do with accountability? Yes?
Even though we all might witness the same problem or have the same experience, we're not actually having the same experience because perception and prior experiences are going to make us interpret everything differently.
Exactly. You all looked at it from your own perspective. Same thing happens with a problem. Sheena, were you going to say something?
Yeah, well, I just feel like we all look for different things too. I know I sent out a postcard that I sent out to all new students, to different people to proofread, and
Okay.
I proofread for spelling mistakes and correct dates and that sort of stuff. And somebody else that I sent it to looked at everybody in the picture, so it was a picture of a crowd, to make sure that nobody was flipping off the camera or doing something inappropriate. And so I went to do a thought to look for that.
Okay.
So you just have
It's what you're focused on too, right? You're focused on different things than the other, proofreaders. Same thing with this. Same thing with a problem. We all look at things differently. And yet, what is the importance of obtaining the perspectives of other people when you are dealing with a problem situation or an issue? What does that do? What's the value of that? Yes?
You're able to solve it for the best. Like if you look at a problem and you're like, this is the one way to do it, but then you take it to someone else and their idea might be a lot better, and you just might be like, for me, like I always look at things and for some reason I'm always like find the most complex way to do it.
Okay.
And take it to someone else and be like, no, all we have to do is just like this simple step. And so I think like how the previous like being able to take that criticism and be like, okay, this is the best for the department. I'm not gonna let my pride get in the way of what's best for my.
Right, or take it personally for what's good for the good of the team. Yeah. So let's say, remember, accountability starts with what? Defining what? The desired results, exactly. So if the desired result is that every one of you saw all 27 items, if that was the way to solve the problem, what would we have had to have done? What needs to be done? Okay, could organize yourselves around and figure out, you take the top left part, you take the top right part, I'll take the bottom right, whatever. Divide it up into parts, and you each take a part, have a process for it. How else could we have done it or done differently so that you all saw 27 items? What, Becky?
We could all start shouting them out, I guess.
Okay, start shouting them out, and one person write them all down. Good. Bruce?
I think time is crucial. I mean, you have to
Okay.
have enough time to see what really is the problem and really what's out there that maybe we need to look at a little bit more.
Absolutely. Time. Exactly. Yes. Taking a picture. You bet. Taking a picture and everybody gets a picture and writes it down. All right? So again, looking at a problem from a lot of different perspectives is very valuable. And again, the time of essence too. Time to look at the problem, not jump to solutions right away, but really taking the time to analyze what is the real problem here and getting the right people involved and then communicating about it. Okay? Questions or comments on that? Any thoughts? All right, so let's go back to the third bullet, or the third behavior is asking for and offering feedback. So this slide just represents the different filters that we all have with the feedback that we receive on a daily basis. We're all bombarded with feedback every day from a lot of different perspectives. And we have choices that we make as to what are we going to do with that feedback. And some questions that we might ask ourselves to determine what we're going to do with that feedback is it accurate? You know, or is it inaccurate? Am I going to accept it? Is there any basis for that feedback? Is it pertinent or irrelevant feedback? Is it right or wrong based on my perception of right or wrong? And each time that you ask yourself that question, you're filtering out feedback and you're whittling down the amount of feedback that you have at the end. All right? Where you have a choice then, are you going to accept that feedback? Are you going to reject it? Or are you going to use that feedback? All right? But asking for and offering feedback is a critical component of seeing the situation. You need to get feedback as well as you need to offer feedback to those others that are involved in the problem or the issue at hand. This represents just the fact that feedback creates an accountability, a culture of accountability. So if we were to start here, where we ask for, accountable people ask for feedback and they offer feedback, that feedback then is filtered, then creates accountable people because we're constantly asking for and offering feedback. And it's a cycle that we have that helps create that culture of accountability because we are free to offer and receive feedback amongst one another regarding the issues or the problems that we're dealing with. Becky, were you going to say something?
I just was thinking, I like that because we're very rarely self-aware, like truly self-aware. And so in asking for it, I think it gives another set of eyes, another set of experiences, a whole other life of experiences that you objectively, I guess.
Exactly. And sometimes we have to ask for it, don't we? But you know what? That can be risky, can it not? Asking for feedback? It can be very risky depending upon who you ask. Might be part of it. So it comes back to a personal choice of whether you want to ask for the feedback. Because what do you need to be prepared for if you ask for it? You may not like what you hear. You may get some negative feedback. That happened the example I gave you yesterday, after yesterday's session when I asked Renee for feedback. Some of it I didn't like to hear. She gave me some positive feedback, but she gave me some feedback for improvement. You know, and sometimes it's like, ooh, ouch. You know? Yeah, Trudy.
I think most people, if they're going to say something to you, because they want to help you.
Yes.
There may be instances where people are just mean, but I think you can't take it personal. You have to take it personal to a point in order to make a change. But anything that's said like that is generally meant for your own good.
Yes.
And you can get the hairs on your back and your neck a little up, like you said, but in the long run, if you can be pliable enough to take it that way,
Yes.
you're much better off.
I agree. And, you know, with the intent being to help somebody, you know, for improvement and that you want to help them. There's I may have shared this the other day, there's a phrase we use in our organization called assuming innocence, or seen the innocence. And it's when you ask for feedback or someone tells you something, if it's maybe something that's not real pliable, you don't like to hear it, you need to assume the innocence in that person, that they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart, that they want to help you. And their intent is for improvement. It's not to hurt you. It's not to make you feel bad about yourself, but the intent is to help. So I think your point is very well taken. And that helps create that accountability and that feedback that's given amongst a department or within a culture. So, okay. Just some things to consider when asking for and offering feedback. When asking for feedback, I'm going to suggest that you ask it in such a way where you say, what feedback do you have for me? Versus, do you have any feedback for me? Now, slight difference in words, but huge difference in the outcome that you may get as a result. What's the difference between those two questions and the outcome that may result?
One's open-ended and one is a yes or no.
Okay.
Easy answer. Easiest answer by saying no.
Okay, exactly. It's easy to say yes or no to do you have any feedback for me? But that first one, first of all, it implies that you have some feedback for me. It's much more inviting to say, what feedback do you have for me? And it kind of gives that person permission to give feedback, even if it's maybe not the positive feedback, but it's feedback for improvement. And it's more of an invitation to say, I know you have some feedback and I really want to hear it. So please share it with me. Okay? And I'm going to suggest when offering feedback that instead of just saying, I got some feedback for you, you ask the question, can I give you some feedback? Now, why might I suggest that you ask if you can give somebody feedback instead of just give it to them? Yes, Sheena?
Sometimes there's a time and a place for feedback, and sometimes you're just not in a mental state to be able to accept it. And you might say, I'm really busy right now, can I get your feedback later, or something like that, to make sure that they're in a state of mind or even a situation where they're able to accept it.
Exactly. So it puts the ownership back on the person that's going to be receiving the feedback and gives them the chance to say, yeah, I'd like some feedback, or like you said, maybe it's not a time. Because you're right, sometimes we're just not in a place mentally, physically, whatever, to receive feedback at the time. So just by simply asking. Right? Questions or comments on the feedback piece? Again, it's one of those behaviors that helps you see the situation for what it is, because you're getting feedback from several different sources, so you have more information regarding the problem or the issue that you're working on. Okay? Yes, Bruce?
I think too, it's almost more important that if somebody does give you feedback, don't you feel like it's important for you to act on some of that feedback? Or do you think that we just take it in and we just process it? And do you think it helps the situation if we act on what they're telling us to make things better? Or
yeah, I do. I do. I think we have a choice to whether we want to accept the feedback and actually implement what they say, or do what they're suggesting. We can reject it, or we can, really those are the two. We can accept it and do it, or we can reject it. That's our choice. So.
But if we solicit that, don't you feel like it's kind of incumbent upon us to act on it?
That we're obligated?
Are we obligated to feedback?
Are you asking, are we obligated to do the behavior or do the action of
Or to look critically at ourselves and see what could change?
I think so, if we ask for it. My opinion, if I ask for feedback from someone, I don't feel like I'm obligated to do it necessarily what they say, but I'm obligated to take that and at least process it if I ask for it. Well, otherwise, why ask for it? Is my answer your question?
I guess that's what I'm asking. They want to know that we're valuing what they say. And so how do you convey that after you've taken that in?
I've learned sometimes orientation is a program that gets a lot of feedback from different campus departments. And I've learned that, sometimes I'll hear feedback and I won't necessarily be able to implement something because of, I don't know, constraints that I have on my end. But whenever I am able to make a change or I have taken something into consideration and it's affected my program, I'll always try to write back to that person or let them know and be like, hey, I appreciate your
Thanks for
feedback. Because of this, I'm making these changes. Let me know if that helps the situation. If not, let me know again. So that way they feel sort of validated in their feedback. So when feedback is implemented a change, I'll always report that back to the person who gave me the feedback.
Yeah, and by doing that, you're helping build a culture of feedback because people see that you're actually doing something with the feedback and that you're really sincerely wanting my feedback. So, yeah. Other questions or comments about feedback? Yes.
Sometimes I found when I ask feedback, I sense that maybe it's more patronizing kind of feedback that's not useful. I wouldn't say it's dismissive, but it's not, it's just, you just feel like
Out
they're
there?
not- yeah, it's just out there and you don't feel like you're really getting what's really under the, it's not coming out.
What you're asking for,
Yeah.
what you really need?
Yeah. Or what the truth is, it's just more surface stuff.
Yeah.
And I know that takes building a culture of trust, but when that, you don't have that opportunity and you'd like to let them know you truly would like, that, I don't know if anybody wants to speak to that or anything, but I just found sometimes I've come away asking for it and not really
Getting much. Becky?
Sorry, I'll
No.
But I think maybe it's a give and take too. Like it's kind of like a truth thing. Like you're gonna share with your girlfriend some sort of truth, and she's gonna share an equally risky truth per se. You know what I mean? I don't know.
And that builds that trust that you're talking about, helps build that trust. Sometimes I found too, I don't know if this is really getting to what you're talking about, but it's more a level of specificity. When you ask for feedback and it's kind of just, it's just real surfacey. And I will a lot of times say, could you be more specific? Could you give me an example of, like what I did or what I could do or something, and ask them to be more specific. But I do think also back to what Sheena was saying, when people see that their feedback's being implemented, they're going to be more apt to give concrete, sincere feedback because they know do you really want it? And number two, that you're going to do something about it. So I don't know, anybody else have any other ideas or thoughts on that? Yes.
I feel like when you ask what feedback do you have for me instead of do you have any feedback for me, it's more inviting, which probably makes the other person giving the feedback more open to give you honest feedback instead of trying to beat around the bush, you know what I mean? It would be easier for me if somebody asked me that to be truthful about it instead of, very, vague or, ambiguous about it.
Yeah. It's a little more, it's almost like it gives the person permission to be honest with you. I've found that it's just, it's like, okay, you want it, and you know that I have some feedback for you and you really want it, so I'm going to give it to you. Now, will it happen right away? May with some, but others it may take a while to get to that point. So, I don't know, does that help? Or anybody else have any other ideas or thoughts? Yes.
In the world of academia here, we ask students to give faculty feedback in student evaluations. Really whether the faculty want that feedback or not. What about forced feedback? You're systematically trying to provide feedback, trying to buy faculty members that religiously look at that and try to improve it. I don't think they pay any attention whatsoever.
Pay attention.
To the written feedback.
Are there consequences to looking at the feedback and making changes to not do anything about the feedback?
If they do it positively, I think it can help in their tenure process. If they don't, I'm not sure if there's
Really anything
their
that,
experience.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, you go in restaurants and they have the little comment cards and they ask for feedback, and you maybe have a bad experience and you give them the feedback. And the next time you go and you experience the same thing, to me, it's like, why'd you ask me for the feedback? Why'd you even ask me then? If you don't really want it, my opinion is don't ask for it if you're not going to do anything with it. And I don't think that's to say that you have to do everything, like in the student evaluation, because there's some things you're obviously not going to be able to do. But I think if you're honestly want the feedback, then ask for it. But if not, don't waste my time. But I don't know. Maybe it's part of the process, though, that has to happen.
I'm talking about forced feedback and not really paying attention. I have to tell you this really funny story. A couple months ago, Discover Card made this huge mistake on my card, and it was $12,000 mistake. And it took $12,000. And it took about, I'd say, maybe between 4 and 6 weeks to get straightened out. And by the end of the process, I didn't lose any money, fortunately, but I was under a lot of stress. And I just decided I was going to close the card because by the end of the 4 weeks, it was more than one mistake. It was actually 3 mistakes, one after another. So I finally closed my account. And the next week, I get a letter in the mail that says, "Tell us how we're doing. We want your feedback.
Yeah.
We noticed that you closed your account, but we still want your feedback." I was like, closing my account, I think it's probably enough feedback, isn't it? Getting closed. So you get those form letters, and it's like they don't really care.
Well, especially if the right hand is not the left hand's doing it, that probably keeps
Yeah.
completely different energy than people that are dealing
Yeah.
with your problem.
It was a computer-generated letter.
But I feel like feedback can be so polarized because, like, a lot of times people give feedback only if they've had a really bad experience or a really good experience. But if it's just solid, like, they don't often say, like, oh, everything went smooth and, there weren't any mistakes. And so I know when I do orientation surveys, I try to, like, stress to the students that I really do read every comment that comes in because, I have the power to be flexible and to change my program, whereas some other places might not have that power. They might have to go through committees or things to change things. And so to try to get even that, it was good, it was solid feedback in addition to the polarized.
Yeah.
Really bad.
Like the faculty, when they get their feedback, I'm assuming they have the power to make changes, or do they have to go through processes or red tape to make changes that might be suggested? Do they?
No, changes in format and style, I think they have
They're empowered to do that.
If there's a problem with the curriculum, then there's a curriculum process you have to go through.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I think
So
they
it
have
depends.
the
Yeah.
power to do it.
Any other thoughts on forced feedback? Okay. The only other thing I want to mention about feedback, and I don't have it up here, but I like to thank people for feedback. Once they give it, even if it's not what you wanted to hear, is just simply saying thank you for the feedback. And saying it sincerely, obviously, that you are thankful that they shared it with you. Because, again, if you look at it, like Trudy was saying, with the intent, that you know that it was their intent to help you, then I'm thankful for that. So thank you for the feedback. All right? Okay. So, next step is report card. And did you give that to them, Renee, the report card? Okay. You have the accountability exercise that Renee gave you. And if you'll turn to the first page of it, where it says up at the top, report card for See It. All right? And on the left-hand side, then you'll see the key behaviors that we talked about. All right? And then on the right-hand side, the scoring column. And that that rectangle is split into 2 triangles. What I want you to do is if you look on item 1 here, the first item is to individually grade yourself on the 4 accountability behaviors. And be honest with yourself. Give yourself an A, B, C, D, or F on each one of those behaviors. And I want to put your grade in the upper left-hand triangle under the scoring column. All right, and then number 2 is to individually grade your work unit or your team on the 4 accountability behaviors. And again, your team is whoever you want to define as your team. And put that score in the lower triangle of that scoring column. And then at the bottom where it says overall grade for See It, give yourself and your team an overall grade. All right, and then the last item, number 3, is answer the 2 questions. Which one of the behaviors is most critical to improve? So ask yourself, if you could improve in just one of these behaviors, which one would be most critical for you to improve, that you'd get the most bang for your buck? You'd see the most change if you were to improve in that area. And then specifically, what more can you do to improve the results? So take a few minutes, give yourself and your team a grade, answer the questions. Do you think it would be helpful to talk about, have them share some of their responses or not, to how they saw themselves or how they saw their team? Or do you think it's more of a private thing with this group?
No. I think that they like to share stories. So I would say if this is one I'd like to share, particularly is for the purpose of discussion.
Okay.
So they have experience on this one.
Okay. Okay, it looks like most everybody is done. I'd just kind of like to open it up and see if there's anybody that would like to share any particular part of the report card in terms of how they see themselves or their team, and maybe the area that you've identified that you feel is most critical to improve for yourself or for your team. Would anybody like to share? Yes, thank
What
you.
I thought was most critical to improve was communicate openly and candidly.
Okay, for yourself or for your team? Or, okay,
Because I think that's a key, that if that's, like, if that were an F, then everything else would fall in. It didn't matter if you were giving good feedback, like, you were communicating what you were doing in your, like, what project you were working on, if you were, I don't know.
Okay, so that's kind of the basis. If you don't have this, you don't have the other things, is kind of what you're saying. Okay, good. All right. So did you identify or think about some things that you could specifically do to improve the results in that area? Can I think about it?
That was my same area though, and I think for me as a supervisor, setting clear expectations helps with that communication.
Yep.
There we go.
Yeah, it's defining the result is really what you're doing. What's the expectation? What's the result that I expect? And being very clear about that. Yeah, is great. What else? Any other ideas? How about anybody else want to share what their item was, either for their team or for themselves? Buddy?
I think my
Okay.
team's a lot better than I am in every category.
That's
My hardest
usually the-
one, I think the one that I need to improve the most in is asking for and offering feedback.
Okay.
Kind of hard to do.
I think that's kind of a tough one for a lot of people, I think. Yeah, and why do you think that is a difficult, I mean, why is feedback so hard for, I think, for cultures to get to the point where they're just real good at it? Trudy? Okay, you don't want to be offended, and you certainly don't want to offend others. At least listen to it, and that's hard, isn't it? But that's that listen for the hard things in order to see reality. You know, I mean, that's a real piece of it, though. Because, you know, it goes back to what you said, Trudy. People don't want to say things to hurt you. And so that if they do give you feedback that is kind of hard, you can probably bet it was pretty hard for them to share it with you, too. But yet, it was important enough to them for you to hear that, even though it was hard to hear, because they felt it was important enough that it was going to improve somehow. Yes?
Well, I think often, like in my situations too, I feel like I'll know I did something wrong, so therefore asking for the feedback is like feeling redundant because I already know what I did wrong, so I don't want to hear it from other people, when really that's probably when I should hear it from other people, because sometimes other people will make you want to change it more.
Okay. Or they may even have some ideas of things that you can do, you know, to change it too. Becky?
Or it may not have been as big of a deal as you thought.
As you thought. Because I think we are critical of ourselves, you know, and sometimes we don't think we did something well when maybe others think we did, you know. So, Bruce?
I was just gonna say, you know what, I think anytime you open yourself up to, you know, like what you were saying, anytime you open yourself up to having somebody take a pot shot at you, that's kind of how you feel. You're like, man, what did I just do, and why did I solicit that when I'm doing okay? And I think you get into some sort of a self-pride issue, and that, you know, that you put up a wall that says nobody can touch me. And you're putting that mentality up as you do those things, but on the other hand, you know, it's something that I think we need to get past, because it betters what happens in that organization or in your life. It'll better whatever it is, because it makes you aware of things, but it's also very difficult to take criticism.
Yes.
Nobody likes to, I mean, I don't like to sit in the room and have somebody just kill me on what I'm not doing right. If they have positive feedback now, I feed on that. I can live every day.
Bring it on, huh?
How good I am. You know, but when you tell me how bad I am, I don't want to hear it. And I just clam up. Or, you know, I think that's the same way when we tell our people that we work with. You know, I think we have to be aware of that as well. Maybe they don't want to hear from us as managers how bad it is, and we need to be more positive.
For me, it's just as hard for me to hear it as it is to give it. I mean, I don't like giving it any more than I do hearing it. You know, so it's when it does happen, it's probably meant with a sincerity heart, you know, when it's given. Yes?
Well, there are always those little tasks in everybody's job that they hate and they really don't want to do. And when someone offers me feedback on those things that you hate, that means more work on that thing that you hate.
Yes.
So feedback equals work, and that's also one of the reasons people might be averse to feedback.
Yeah.
Because feedback essentially equals work.
Because they see it, yeah.
Like, there are certain little tasks in my job that I absolutely despise. And when I'm given feedback, I'm like, why do I have to continue to look at this? I'll do it, but I'll do it begrudgingly.
But there may be times when maybe that somebody will have some feedback to make that task not so difficult, or to or with it, it's more enjoyable, or that it's not such a pain in your, you know what. So, you know.
If you're honest with yourself, and you really know where you are at work-wise, if you're honest with yourself, and that feedback actually should be appropriate, it should be helpful. You
Yes.
already know where your needs needed.
Yes.
But the thing that feedback, it should be a way to help you accomplish those tasks more efficiently or
Better way, yet. Yes, it does. Yep.
honest with ourselves, it surely should.
But that's a big if sometimes.
That's a hard place to come to.
Yes.
To be honest.
Yeah, but that in that place of vulnerability, I mean, that is one of the best things to do to build trust in an organization. When you can be vulnerable with one another and walk away from it, you know, not feeling like you've just been beat up. I mean, that's such a trust builder in a team when you can be vulnerable with one another and be okay with it, you know, and know that your heart was a sincere heart in giving me that feedback and trying to improve. So, Becky, were you going to say something?
Well, I was just thinking, yeah, of course.
That's all right.
I was just thinking that if you flip your, I guess we're talking about attitude, but if you flip your mentality about feedback, and that these people that you're surrounding yourself, you should trust, you should, I mean, and you may not like them always, but I mean, you should at least have some sort of respect. And so if they're giving you some kind of feedback, then they're wanting to make you better as well.
Yes.
And hoping that you'll do the same. So just maybe
It's reciprocated. Yeah, absolutely.
I just had a couple of interviews with different departments about what we could do better in the post office for them. And I seriously had to, please tell me. You know, you have to pull it from me because I don't want to hear that everything's okay. I want to know what I could do better, or we as a department could do better. And once they started coming out with stuff, it was some wonderful ideas, just wonderful ideas that were very, very helpful.
Did you have to
But
kind of frame it up a little
I had
bit?
to go in, I had to beg it from them, and I had to go in with an attitude of, you know, and they were doing it to help me. They weren't doing it to criticize me. I really appreciated that.
And if you implement some of their ideas, I bet you'll get even more feedback, you know, as time goes, which is, again, helps build that whole cycle of building a culture of accountability where we freely give and receive feedback. Doesn't make it easy to hear all the time, but that's not what we're here for. We're not here to make everybody feel good, are we? We're here to get a job done. Yeah, yeah, except for Renee. I forget about Renee. Sheena?
I feel like we talked about the below the line of, oh, it's not my job, and I feel like asking for feedback is very much my job, but sometimes I feel like offering feedback is a luxury because it doesn't, I feel like asking for feedback has a really quick, direct result on my programs, but taking the luxury of the time to really be reflective to offer feedback, that might have a longer, it might take longer for it to implement and actually affect the program. And so I feel like asking for feedback is very clearly part of my job and something I do all the time, but really taking the time to offer good feedback and spend that time, sometimes I just don't have time for in my day. I don't set aside that time to really be reflective.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's not good for my employees. I don't always have that time to really sit down and offer that feedback as
Yeah.
well as I should.
I mean, this is just a personal philosophy of mine. I look at feedback as a gift. That when I am given feedback, someone's given me a gift. And I feel like when I offer feedback, I'm giving someone a gift of things that they could do to improve. Because I think, how would I feel if I knew I had something to share, say, with Becky? If I knew there was something that I could share with Becky that would make her a better employee and I chose not to, just because I was uncomfortable, how would I feel? Knowing that I could have done something to make Becky a better person or help Becky or what have you, but I chose not to just because I was a little uncomfortable. But if I look at it as, I have a gift to give to her. I've got something, she can take it or leave it. It's her choice. Again, we always have a choice what we do with that feedback. So, just another way to look at it. Okay? Any other thoughts on the see it behaviors? The first step of accountability. Do you need a break? We've been sitting for a little bit. Do you want to take a 5-minute break? Okay.
When I look through this all, I have to say this one probably is the hardest.
You mean of the steps? Yeah. I think it is too, because unless you do this, unless you really see it for what it is, it's really hard to do the others. And this is the one that a lot of times takes the most time, because
it's out of your control. I mean, you have to have the courage to ask.
Yes, courage is the good word. A lot of times, yeah, you do.
Or the courage to accept, whichever one.
Mm-hmm. And the time.
I suspect that asking for feedback may be more effective than offering feedback. That's true.
Say that again. You think?
Asking for feedback may be more effective because you're indicating you want it, as opposed to offering feedback when you don't know if they really want it. Even if asking, can I do it? You can change yourself.
Yeah, because when you're asking for feedback, again, the implication is that I want it, so there's more receptiveness there. Whereas offering feedback, you're banking on them being receptive to what you have to say, and it's out of your control at that point, right? Really, because asking for feedback, you have control whether you want to do anything with the feedback or not. When you're offering feedback, once you offer it, it's out of your control because they hadn't have a choice what to do with it. So yeah, I think I would agree with that. It's probably, you see more results, I guess, maybe from asking for feedback as opposed to offering feedback. I don't know, any other thoughts on that? Maybe any other way to look at that? I'd say that's probably.
I just know someone who loves offering feedback.
I drive you
Yeah, they just go, oh no, I will not say.
Do they ask for feedback? Or not? Nope. They're just good at offering. Yep. Yeah.
Asking for feedback.
Okay.
I'm just wondering if anyone else had anything that wasn't communicating open and candidly or anything involving feedback, because mine, actually, my lowest grade essentially had nothing to do with feedback, sort of.
It was one of the other behaviors,
Yeah,
you mean?
I was just wondering if anyone had anything else, because mine was actually the first one. I was wondering if anyone had a lower grade that didn't have to do it.
Getting the perspectives of others was your lowest?
I had a hard time separating those.
Those two really, yeah, they're kind of, depending upon what you look at, how you look at it, they're kind of hand in hand. But tell me more what you're thinking about why'd you grade yourself low in obtaining perspectives of others?
Well, I work in the Center for Sustainability, which is a lot of eco-friendly stuff,
Okay.
Sustainability, recycling, things like that. And these are difficult concepts for a lot of people they care about them, but they care about them to the point where like, oh, it's important, but not important enough for me to recycle.
And someone else do it, right?
Yeah.
It's important you guys do that.
And it's a tough sell, and we do a lot of selling in my office. We have to sell it to people, why it's important, why we need this money to do this, why we need this space to do that. And we acknowledge the fact that a lot of people don't think it's as important as we do, but personally, I find it difficult to get past that wall because I'm like, but this is important. It seems so obvious and natural that it should be important that I can't understand how to make it seem important to other people. I can't communicate that to other people.
So therefore, it makes it hard for you to get the perspectives of others because they're not in alignment with yours at all.
Exactly. And with everything else in my life, I can kind of understand, but this is the one area of my life where it makes absolutely no sense, and I can't communicate that to people. And that's a very large part of my job, is being able to communicate why this is important.
Just because
Why
I
you
said so.
Why you should care, why it's important.
But I feel like
Things
that's
like
like a
that.
perfect opener. Like when you're talking to people, you can say, you know, for me, this is such a priority. You know, why isn't it for you? What would make it easier for you to understand? Like, and that's sort of that opening, you know, where you admit that that's a failing on your part, that you have a hard time seeing past that, and it sort of gives them an opening to.
It kind of opens the door then for them to.
Yeah, from the layman's perspective, because I feel like Brent Jones in Career uses a thing where sometimes like math teachers who are so good at math that math comes really easy to them when they have to teach like a remedial math class, it's hard for them because it's like, well, why don't you understand this? This is so easy. And so for sometimes to come from it from the layman's perspective, and rather than somebody who knows so much about it, you know, just like changes that perspective. I don't know.
And maybe it's a matter of redefining who others is. You know, obtaining the perspectives of others. Who is others in your mind? And maybe it's re-looking or rethinking who others is. Or rethinking what perspective are you trying to get. You know, maybe it's not around how you feel about it or the importance, but it's, you know, maybe how do I influence other people that don't feel as passionately about this and get perspectives of others around that. I don't know, just some thoughts. Becky?
I've been extensively involved in sales before, and I think maybe this is manipulative, but I think maybe that's what you're going to need to do is like approach them the way they need to be, the way they need to be spoken to, instead of saying what you want them to hear. Ask them, like she said, you know, why isn't it important, and then attack it from that. Just like, I mean, with feedback, like nobody wants to hear that they suck at something, so approach it in, I don't know, that's
Kind of put yourself in their shoes and approach it like you were one of them.
as you know, their personality, even in the
Yeah.
5 seconds that you've been talking to them, you know,
Sure.
over the phone, whatever.
All right, we need a break, someone said. So let's take, can we come back at, well, it's like a 4-minute break. Can we come back a quarter after? All right, get up and stretch, get a drink of water, get another roll up. All right, so we have now completed the first step. We see it, right? We see the situation for what it is in its entirety, not just our perspective. Yep, thumbs up. Good job. All right, so now we're ready to go to own it. Okay, and let's talk about what own it means. Basically, it means that you're going to own either it or your piece of it or what have you. But you're going to assume some ownership in getting the problem solved, getting the issue resolved, or whatever it is. So, the 4 behaviors associated with own it. Are you talking to me, Lee? Okay. Number 1, being personally invested. Now, from an ownership perspective, or if it's a problem, what does being personally invested mean? And what does it look like to be personally invested in something?
You're willing to work to solve it.
Okay, you're willing to, okay, it's important to you, you're willing to work to solve it. Do you think Denise's team is personally invested in what they do? No. Better be, right? Especially with the audience of maybe naysayers that you have, that you work with. So, yeah, owning it, being personally invested, like Carl said, being willing to solve it or being willing to get involved and do what you have to do. Yes.
Seeing the accomplishment as being a personal accomplishment, not necessarily just a team accomplishment.
Good.
Or accomplishment your organization so happened to complete.
Yeah, but you take it personally that you had some part in it or whatever. Is it Brandon?
Yeah.
Okay, Brandon?
Yeah, and the same thing, it's like, whatever the end result, to some degree, will affect you either personally or directly or financially or whatever it is. I mean, there's a reason that whatever it is, you're going to get something out of it.
Okay, good, exactly. You're invested in it in some respect. How about acknowledging my involvement? Seems pretty self-explanatory, but what does that mean in relation to accountability and solving a problem? Trudy?
Maybe not just assigning it to somebody and letting it go,
Okay.
but acknowledge your part in it.
All right.
You know, in solving that, whether it's follow-up with somebody else or just trying to work on it yourself or as part of the puzzle.
Okay, exactly. And acknowledging that, yeah, you are involved, or if you're, that you're a part of it, and acknowledging that. If someone comes and says, hey, are you part of this team that's working on this, you know, and they don't like it, not saying, hey, I know nothing about it, talk to her. No, saying, yeah, I am part of it. What can I do for you? What can I answer for you? Or what questions do you have? That sort of thing. Sheena, you were going to mention
I was
something.
watching Kitchen Nightmares last night, and they go into like bad restaurants.
Is this another reality show?
Well, Gordon Ramsay just goes into bad restaurants and like tries to revitalize them and fix things. And
Okay.
there was one server that was just not acknowledging their involvement. You could tell he was distancing himself by his language. You know, they do this, the kitchen does this, and not like acknowledging their part in the team in the restaurant and trying to like distance themselves from the bad food. And I felt like he was very much not acknowledging.
Great example, yeah. It was a lot of them, no words that indicated that I was a part of it at all. Yeah, good. Any other thoughts? Somebody else had their hand up, I thought. Yes.
Because I used to think, when I first did this, I kind of gave a good grades on being personally invested, but then tried to explain that, I thought, well, wait a minute. How many times have I been in a meeting where somebody expressed a problem and asked to throw it out there, their solution to it? Or, for example, the president talked about the budget and things, and I going, well, I don't have any answers for you, that's so beyond me. And just dismissing it and just going, okay, is that an example of not being personally invested, even though, you know, I was directly affected by that. I didn't offer any solutions. So I just sit there and think, how many times have I done that?
Yeah.
You know, that it's not in my realm. I don't think that's just not my stuff, but it's from you. To what extent should we expect ourselves
To be a part of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, you know, maybe it goes back to that rethinking our role and what, you know, our involvement in different aspects of the business. And maybe never having seen yourself as part of it, but maybe really you are. You know, maybe indirectly, but at least perhaps acknowledging it.
And I'd have to say it's so stupid and anal because it's just, you know, I don't know, that's so beyond me that I'm sitting there and think, oh, I guess I'm supposed to get invested in all that.
Well, I'm not sure you have to, I don't think you have to invest in everything. I mean, it's got to be relative to your area of responsibility.
Or to whatever the problem is at hand, you know. Yeah.
Students think the dean should be able to solve all problems, you know. So there's a lot of areas that are totally outside my area that I can do anything about, but I can help direct them
Right.
to the right area. But I don't know that I need to, you know.
But you're still taking an accountable standpoint when you at least direct them. You know, you could say, hey, I don't know. Good luck, buddy, find somebody. Or you could say, no, but I can find somebody that can help you. Is that being personally invested? Well, maybe not so much in the problem at hand, but you're invested in the success of the students, which is what your role is. So it may take on very different forms. It doesn't mean, you know, that you have to know everything about everything, but that
You understanding their perspective, like the student behind you was talking, you know, she doesn't understand where all these non-recycling people are coming from. But at least you see that's how students look to you as the ultimate problem solver. And you know that that's how they view you, and so you are there for them at least to direct them to where they can get help.
yeah.
Okay, I'll get my grade back.
Yeah,
You're okay.
You didn't fail yourself, did you?
No, well, I was just thinking, well, I've always thought if a problem comes to me and I don't have the answer, I'll either find it out or I'll direct them to a way to do it. So
That's being personally invested, absolutely. That's
I would never say that's not my job, you know.
right. Or just send them out to the wolves
Yeah,
and
they
let them
don't
find their
try
own
to-
answer.
yeah.
But no.
prior to my life here at SUU, I worked for an airline. And I was a manager within that airline. And one of the issues that we always used to hear is, well, why did your company do this? And I said, and I always had to have a response, but sometimes that's not my choice about what the company did, and I'm just a player in that company. But yet I still had to maintain the role of the company and how, if it was one of them that was asked the question, how would they answer that question? And I always had to kind of think about that as to how I would relate that back to them, because not always those, right, shoot, I mean, I live in a city where if I could get 10 flights a day, I would be happy, but we're reducing them. And why are you reducing flights? Well, it's, and then you kind of have to go in and explain a little bit about what you do and say, hey, I wish we had that too, but here's the situation. And I think that goes along with acknowledging my involvement in that, because it wasn't my decision to do that, but yet I still had to maintain the company perspective.
Right. You're a representative of that company.
I'm representing that company. I might not always agree with everything that happens, but yet I somehow have to turn it into a spin that people will actually acknowledge that it's okay.
Right.
Because if I'm downplaying everything that they do, am I really owning that? Am I taking ownership of that problem?
Right.
I don't want to belabor the point, that just made me laugh, because on Saturday, I was trying to move over some mileage points from one place to another, and when I asked the call center who I would speak to, I was talking to someplace in Bolivia, right? So they're asking me for my social security number and my stuff, and I'm sending it out over the phone to someplace in another part of the world, and yet when I asked to get my account number, they were supposed to be one account another, but I lost track of giving me my account number. They could not give me that personal information, and I just had to laugh and say, I just gave you.
Yeah.
I'm wide open, but
Yes.
you won't give me back
My own account information. Yeah. Yeah, what's wrong with that picture, huh?
Yeah.
They were scammers.
Did you get it resolved? Did you get
They
your?
would not give it to me. They just
Oh, they still would- they would not give it.
I appreciate that, but you have to understand how ironic that is.
Yeah, exactly.
Olivia, what's ironic?
Yeah. What's ironic mean? All right, how about the third? Recreating and maintaining a sense of alignment. Kind of gets what Bruce was talking about. That alignment between the people or the parties involved in that organization or that problem. It's creating that and maintaining that by what you say and by what you do. That you're representing the company or you're representing that problem or that process, and that there's a sense of alignment between the people involved. And then the last one, committing to both my personal and my team's objectives. All right? Again, you have your objectives as a person, what you want to accomplish, but also you're a part of a team. Your teams have objectives. So by owning it, you're committing to both. That you're acknowledging your involvement in that team that's working on that process or that problem, and that you're committing to both objectives from your own personal standpoint as well as your team. All right? So again, owning it is being the investment part, you're involved, you're committed to the objectives, and that there's a sense of alignment. Okay? Yes,
I do
Sheena.
have to laugh though. Sometimes I feel like I give my students permission to not own it and to say, oh, well, that's our policy, or, that was my boss's decision, and then have them send them to me instead of having them try to deal with a really forceful person or something like that. So to use not owning it as like a defense mechanism.
Yes.
To transfer it.
Good point. Yeah. Yeah. Let somebody else deal with it, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody that had the decision making. I'm just the messenger. Don't shoot the messenger. So go to somebody that really had a part of it, right? Yeah, I think we do that a lot. I know you're not the only one there. All right, so let's go back to the report card. Go to the next page. Look at the behaviors. Give yourself a grade. Give your team a grade. And then identify the one area that you are going to improve upon or that you want to improve upon. And specifically, what are you going to do? Okay, it looks like everybody's about done. So in the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and go on to the next step. And if we have time, we'll come back and ask to share. But I want to get through the material because I know some of you have to leave a little bit early to get to a 4 o'clock commitment. So just to kind of wrap up ownership, this is a statement that I think kind of encompasses everything we talked about around the 4 behaviors with ownership. It's kind of confusing unless you break it down. Ownership is the ability to connect the current circumstances, in other words, where you're at now, with what I have done in the past, and the ability to tie the future circumstances, where you want to be, with what I'm going to do. Okay, in other words, what the results are that you're trying to accomplish and what you're going to do to get there. If you can't make these connections, you'll never own it and you won't ever solve it. In other words, it's really kind of a way of saying that you're connecting all of these things in the pyramid. And when you can do that, when you can connect the experiences with the beliefs and the actions that people are taking or that you're taking to get to the results, then you've owned it. Because you've encompassed all of it. Where you've been, where you're at now, and where you want to be. Okay? And taking that ownership with it. So let's go to the next step, and that's solve it. Okay? So we see it, we own it, and now we're going to do something about it. We're going to solve it. Now, how do we do that? The first skill or the first behavior is constantly asking that question that I said don't ever forget is what else can I do? And the operative word there is constantly. To where it just becomes such a part of the way you do your job. It's not like an add-on to your work, but it is your work. It's not like, oh yeah, I do my job and then say, okay, now what else can I do? No, that is what you do. You're constantly asking yourself that. What more can I do to make my job better, to make my student orientation better, to make the recycling better, whatever it is. You're constantly asking yourself that. Actively redefining boundaries. Now, when we talk about solving it, what do we mean by actively redefining boundaries? What do you think that means? Marshall?
Don't just do something because that's how we've done it in the past.
Exactly. Don't just do it because it's the way you've always done it or it's the way that the boss wants it. But it's really looking at, okay, let's cut down the walls here and really look at this creatively. And that kind of goes into number 3, creatively dealing with obstacles. We're really talking about the creativity piece and looking at things differently than you have before. Now, let me ask you something, especially to Sheena's role. Who are some of the best people in your organization to help you with these 2 behaviors, to redefine your boundaries and to creatively deal with obstacles? Who are some of your best people to do that? Yes, Brandon.
Those that have the broadest perspective.
Okay, those that have the broadest perspective. And who are those people in your organization? How do you find those out? How do you find out who those are?
Well, I mean, I think just thinking off the top of my head, those who are most actively like on the ground.
Down the trenches.
Down the trenches doing it, okay, all right. Okay, those people are wonderful to help you with that. There's another group of employees I'm thinking of too. Your new employees. Yeah, you, right. Why? Why are your new employees so valuable at helping you do this?
They don't know how it's been done in the past.
Exactly. They don't know the way we've done it in the past.
Why not customers?
Customers could be too, absolutely. Not just new employees and those, customers could help you. Suppliers can help you. Vendors, absolutely. But those people that you have in-house, like with your new employees, are some of your best advocates because they don't have any preconceived ideas of what it's supposed to be like.
That's how we've always done it.
Ask you why. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know why. How dare you ask me that, right? And then the 4th one is staying focused on results. Again, what is the results? In solving it, you've got to stay focused on what is it we're trying to get to. Because your most effective solutions are going to be those that are focused and directly aligned with the results that you're trying to get. And if you haven't defined that, it makes it pretty hard to come up with a good solution. Just some skills that will help with solving, staying engaged. Now that kind of sounds almost like an, well, no, duh type of thing, staying engaged. But it's really just, it's more kind of going into line 2 or number 2 is being persistent, not giving up. Just staying in there, staying engaged in the process, even though you may get discouraged, but not giving up and being persistent. Using a new paradigm, again, not just being stuck in the old ways we've done it, but really looking at things from a new perspective. Creating new linkages. What might we mean by linkages when we talk about solving it? What are linkages, or what might that be?
I think for us, it's like finding new partnerships or new efficiencies.
Okay.
Like, I think for me, like, you know, instead of me trying to reinvent the wheel, try to find somebody else who's doing it and then tie in with them and work on those relationships.
Okay, exactly. You're exactly right. New partnerships, new relationships that can make you or help you look at things differently. Your competitors. Look at how your competitors are doing things. You might learn some things from them. You know, like I said, your customers, like Bruce mentioned, your suppliers, vendors. Just creating new relationships to help you in getting the most effective solution. Taking the initiative. All right, being out there on the leading edge, and again, being that person that makes things happen. Not that person that's waiting for something to happen, the wait and see, but you are the person out there making things happen. And then staying conscious. Again, that's kind of a no-brainer, but what I mean by that is not getting into that autopilot mode where it's just like, you know, we're just kind of going along, going through the motions. But actually staying conscious and taking yourself out of your comfort zone and really getting involved in the solution. Okay? Any questions or comments or any thoughts on any of those? Yes, Sheena.
I feel like one of our problem areas in Solve It, I guess, is that, you know, we're really good at looking to like peers on other campuses and what they're doing, getting fresh ideas. And so we have this long wish list of projects that we want to do to make the program better, but it's hard to see any of those through to completion because the to-do list and all those great creative ideas just keep lining up.
And we don't have time. We don't have time to.
And so, like, really staying engaged, like, the whole way through a project instead of just at that ideas thing where you're like, oh, this is a great idea, this will solve this problem, and that just is nothing.
But to implementation, yes, absolutely. And it's, you know, it really is, you know, kind of overcoming that autopilot mode, if you will, and you know, the things that we take for granted every day around us that could be done differently and better, but like you said, we always have time to do things the way we've always done them, or the things we have to do, but we don't ever seem to find the time to make things better. At least that's the way in our organization. We have a lot of great ideas too, but they just kind of get in this kind of shoved to the side because we've got business to take care of. So I think that's a very good point, to be conscious along the way and stay with it from beginning to end. Okay? All right, so back to your report card. Go ahead, grade yourself, grade your team, identify one of those behaviors that you feel would be best to improve upon. And then again, what are you going to do to improve the results in that area? Did you happen to give them that one, the accountability plan? Okay, I'm just gonna probably take that with them because we're gonna run out of time, I think. Because typically, or normally what I would do is just transfer their behavior that they identified to that, and they have that to take.
Isn't that what we did yesterday?
Mhm.
They just took home.
Yes.
took-
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you think that worked all right?
Yeah.
I just have some.
No big deal.
Okay.
Because that's, I like that, we can give them something to
Take back with them.
follow up on.
Yeah.
Although, yeah, that's it, accountability.
Yes, it is. I'll make sure to point that out. Okay, looks like everybody's done with that. Okay, we have one more step to do before we have kind of completed the whole 4-step. So we've seen it, we've owned it, we've solved it. Now we actually have to implement it or do it. Okay, it's kind of that step that Sheena was talking about, covering it from start to finish to where we actually implement. All right, so do it. The 4 behaviors. Reporting proactively. Someone talk to me about what that is. Reporting proactively and the value of reporting proactively in the last phase of accountability.
I feel like I really appreciate it when people stop in my office and say, you know, here's where I'm at right now, you know, rather than me having to go.
To
and
go.
be like, you know, what's going on.
Okay.
So I appreciate that.
Did you hear what her words were? I appreciate that. That's what I appreciate about people doing that, is reporting proactively. All right? Is that something you want in your organization? Is a sense of appreciation amongst people? Absolutely. All right? So again, there's a lot of value behind going proactively instead of waiting for that or waiting for someone to ask for that follow-up. And then relentlessly following up. This is where the credibility, your credibility as an employee, as a leader comes in. Because if you say you're going to follow up and then you don't actually do it, you're probably going to find yourself beginning to get a lot of false commitments from people, because I know you're not going to follow up really anyway, so I'll tell you I'm going to do that, or I'll tell you that I'm going to finish that project, but I know you're not going to follow up because you're always going to say you'll do it and you never do. So I'll tell you that. So again, it's actually doing it and being relentless about following up. This skill number 2 is probably one of my organization's biggest faults. We're horrible, in my opinion, at following up. We get a lot of projects almost to the end, close, and then they just kind of fall off. And then you'll hear people say, where are we on that? I thought such and such was going to do that. Well, I did too, but I never did hear anything more. And then it's so deep in the places of the organization, we never can recover it. So again, that following up keeps it alive and well, if you will. Doing the things you say you'll do. That's the integrity. If you say you're going to do it, do it. And then measuring your progress towards achieving the intended results. And that's going to look differently for different people, how you measure that. In some areas, especially in those service areas, that's a little bit difficult to do, to measure services, but there's ways that you can. But actually part of doing it and completing that whole cycle is doing that follow-up and measuring your progress towards what you said your intended result was going to be. Okay? So, questions or comments, thoughts on any of those 4 behaviors? I know we're getting here close to the end. Yes?
Following up, how would you say would be the best way to balance that
With
like not micromanaging?
micromanaging? Well, for me, it's exactly that. It's not getting in the details of what I'm doing, but it's just wanting to know where I'm at with it, and are there any obstacles? I mean, I appreciate my manager coming to me and saying, you know, where are you at on that, and are there any obstacles that are getting in your way that I might help overcome? We talk about it and it's done. He doesn't ask me the nitty-gritty details. So to me, Marshall, that's one of the big differences is you're not getting in the details. You just want to know progress. I don't know. What are other thoughts on that? How do you balance that between you don't want to micromanage, but yet relentlessly following up kind of almost implies that. Yes?
That's a big challenge for us as well. And I know like with some individuals, like we have a big spectrum, like where I don't have to ask twice, like on anything. And people are coming to me and it's done and it's great. And then others are like 10,000 times, I can't spell it out. I give you pictures, like really, and it's not done. Like, and so I think approaching it from the standpoint where what can we all do to assist you in accomplishing that goal?
Good.
As opposed to why are you doing this? What's not happening? Like even saying like what obstacles can we overcome? Like that still like wasn't getting through. I was like, why is this such a problem kind of thing? It wasn't working. I was like, can I hold your hand through this? And then it becomes like that micromanaging, that controlling, like and I don't want to be that type of supervisor.
Right.
I would like to just put it out there and see what they're able to accomplish. When they're not, that's I can buy you a burrito or I can smack you. Either way, it's up to you.
Yeah.
Reporting it in such a way that, how can I help you? Because my boss, he has a really nice balance. He checks in with me. And when he doesn't check in with me, that's when I feel neglected. So when he does check in with me and is following up on a project, and then he always just says, what kind of help do you need to get this done? But I know he's checking up too at the same time, but I know when he offers his help, he's valuing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That support and value as opposed to
Nitpicking that.
Yeah. So I think, Marshall, a big piece of it is looking at your role as being there as a person to help break down the obstacles and help support them. So, any other thoughts on that? Okay, if you haven't already done so, go ahead and grade yourself, grade your team on the 4 behaviors, and then identify that one behavior for improvement. Okay, it looks like about everybody's done. So before we wrap up here this afternoon, do you have anybody have any thoughts or questions about any of the 16 behaviors on the see it, own it, solve it, do it? Anybody? Okay, if not, then let's kind of wrap up here. Renee also gave you a one-page paper entitled My Accountability Plan. Now, the purpose of that was that you could transfer your verbiage from your report card exercise that you just did to that accountability plan. That way you have something to take with you. You can have it in front of you, and again, that's being accountable by taking the behaviors that you identified that you want to improve upon and what you're going to do about it, and you've got it in front of you, and post it somewhere where you're going to have it constantly in front of you so you can constantly remind yourself of the things that you want to do to become more accountable. Okay? This is kind of something I just always like. The 4 kinds of people. People that make things happen, people that watch things happen, people that wonder what happened, and then people that never knew anything happened. So, you know, which person are you? And which person do you want to be? And hopefully when you think back to the behaviors we talked about with do it, you want to be that first person where you're the person that takes the initiative and makes things happen. And you're just kind of known as one of those accountable people that will get things done. So again, like we've talked about, it begins with you. And getting back to our analogy of the Wizard of Oz, the shoes are on your feet. So all you have to do is click your heels, and you are accountable. So thank you very much. Thank you. Good luck to you.